Matching plaid across the front or back of a button-up shirt or dress looks super impressive, but the way I do it is easy, and I'll show you how in this tutorial. This is similar to my technique on how to print match seams, but with a key difference. This tutorial works for button-down shirts or tops or dresses that button up the front or the back, like a shirtwaist dress. Once it's buttoned up, you'll have a perfect continuation of your plaid from one piece to the other. And it also works for buttoned openings and any type of prints too. Let's orient ourselves first. Your shirt or bodice pattern will look something like this vintage pattern at the center front or center back, wherever your buttoned opening is. This part is the facing. Your pattern may have a cut-on facing like this with a fold line, which is where the facing will fold to the inside of the garment. Or it may have a separate facing piece, and instead of the fold line, it would just be the seam line between the bodice and the facing. Either way works with this technique. The center front line will be marked on your pattern piece, so make sure to include it if you're tracing your pattern pieces. I recommend notching the center front line at the top and the bottom, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So what is the center front line when your shirt has an opening? When your garment is complete, it's where you'll overlap the fronts to add your buttons. It's not this edge, which is that fold line. And that center front line is where we're going to match the plaid across the body. Before we dive in, you can't talk about plaid without talking about plaid placement on the garment, or at least I can't. You want to make sure you're going to like where the plaid falls across your body. I'll do a deep dive on placing plaid in the future, but here's a quick cheat sheet. Make sure to consider both the vertical lines and the horizontal lines. We're going to do this on one layer of fabric, and I have a somewhat complex plaid vintage fabric here. You may have heard about balanced plaid and unbalanced plaid. The beauty of this matching technique is it doesn't really matter what type of plaid you have, so don't worry about that part. Make sure that you like how the vertical lines are going to be placed across your body. If you're new to using plaid, it can really help to cut out two of your front pattern piece. I've got one for a previous version of this here. And you're just going to want to overlap the two of them at the center front line. Again, don't do this on the fold line. So you'll overlap them on the center front. So in my case, that would be like this. And then you can even pin through them so you can move this around to sort of simulate how this is going to look. But now you can just move this around more easily to simulate where this plaid is going to fall on the front of your body. You can also do this with the back piece cut out as one open piece instead of on the fold. So how would these vertical lines fall at the center point of your body, off to the sides, up around the shoulders? What looks best to you? And 2 tips on that. First of all, darker and more dominant lines tend to look best if they're off to the side instead of the center of the body. To help with that, and arguably this is my best tip, you want to make sure that at some point you stand away from your plaid, or maybe even take a photo of it and look at it from a distance, because when you're up close looking at your plaid, what you see as a dominant line is not necessarily the actual dominant line. When I am up close looking at this, to me, the yellow and these navy sections appear more dominant. But when I look at this from a distance, I actually see that these red bars are more dominant. So my first thought would have been center the body between these yellow and navy sections. But in actuality, I think what I would do instead is center the body on one of the blue sections and then put the reds off to the sides. And you also want to make sure that you're going to be happy with how the horizontal lines will look at key places, like the neckline, the fullest part of your bust if that's relevant, and then the waistline or the hem depending on how long your piece is. But at the end of the day, this is entirely up to your preference, so you do what you like and what you think looks best. So let's place this pattern piece. I always take my time here to decide how best to use my plaid, so I'll decide on the vertical lines first. Matching plaid does eat up more fabric, so you might want to give yourself maybe an extra half yard or so if you're buying new. Now remember I said I wanted to center the body on one of these turquoise bands and have the reds off to the side. So I'll place my center front line, which is here, exactly in the middle of one of these turquoise sections. It's also nice here to see where your fold line will fall. Mine looks to be about 1/4 inch into this turquoise band. When you think you found the right spot, then do the horizontal bars next. I don't really want one of these red dominant bars to land right at the fullest part of my bust, and I'd like it to end nicely at the top of the neckline as well. But sometimes you're just going to have to make a choice since it can't always be perfect everywhere. Once I'm happy, I will usually leave the piece and then come back later that day to just make sure that I'm still happy and that I didn't miss something obvious. Plaid placement is not an activity if you're in a rush. When you're ready to commit, and I did come back later and move it up a little bit, cut the piece out and transfer any markings like pleats and darts like normal. You now have one front cut out, or back if this is buttoned up the back, and it doesn't matter whether that's the left or the right that you started with. First, we're going to take our paper pattern piece and flip it over and fold it along the center front line. Do not, and I repeat, do not fold it along the facing fold line. If you do this, you'll think you're matching the print, only to find out that you're exactly this far off. Ask me how I know. So again, fold your pattern piece over and fold back along that center front line. Now we essentially want to do the same thing with the front piece of fabric that we cut out. So we're going to flip this over to the opposite side, and we'll fold the fabric in along the center front line. If you notched at the top and the bottom, like I did, fold along that. And if you didn't, you can chalk it in based on your pattern piece. And the nice thing about plaids is all those straight lines, so that makes this pretty easy to do. Now don't worry about the raw edges of the fabric not meeting up here, because remember, in the final garment, you actually will be folding along the fold line for the facing and not the center front line. And so the thing is here, we don't actually want to press in this fold since the finished piece won't be folded along this, and it's really hard to get out creases. So instead we can just take a few pins to keep this nice and flat in the meantime without pressing it into place. And then flip the piece so that the right side of the fabric is out and the facing up to that center front line is underneath. And here's the trick. If you know my method for matching a print along a seam, this will feel very familiar. Go ahead and get your fabric ready and lay the cutout front piece with the facing folded under still, face up on the fabric, and move it around until it matches up to another part of the plaid. Basically, you're finding the same part of your print and overlapping it with the piece that you already cut out. You should barely be able to see your piece on the fabric. Now take your pattern piece and move it so that it's on the opposite side of your fabric piece. Make sure that it's still folded along the center front line too. Line up the paper piece to the fabric piece exactly. Make sure that top and bottom match up as close as you can, because you're lining up the print to match exactly at that center front line when it's overlapped. Now weigh down the paper pattern piece or pin it, except for the folded facing part. Then pull the cut out fabric piece away and unfold the pattern piece with the facing back out so it's laying flat like normal. And before you cut this out, you just might want to check that the lower side edges match from your first piece to what will be your second piece. Sometimes your grain can get a little wonky, so I had to do a little bit of finagling to get this a little bit closer. Just do the best you can. You'll also want to make sure when you cut your back out later, or the front if your buttons are in the back, that that lower edge of the piece matches there too, so that the horizontal lines continue from the front to the back, at least up to the bust dart if your pattern has one. That's a really professional touch to make the lines match from the front to the back. And all that takes is just making sure that the pieces on the front and the back start the plaid pattern at the same spot at the raw edge on the bottom. Cut out your second piece, and you now have a left and right piece. And if you used an uneven plaid, these won't look like mirror images like mine do. And when you sew this and they're overlapped at the center front and the buttons are added, whether or not they're on the left or right side, the plaid or print will continue perfectly across the garment like this. There are other ways to do this, but I find the technique that I just showed is the quickest and easiest way no matter what type of plaid you have, whether it's even or not. So no worrying if you're going to get it right. And because it's so similar to my method for matching prints along a seam, it's easy to remember how to do it every time too. Give this video a thumbs up and be sure to check out my other video on print matching along seams, and I'll see you again soon with more sewing tips.